Welcome back, everyone, to Meditations by Gregory T. Obert, bringing you the best new guided meditations and mental health conversations every week. I'm your host, clinical psychologist, Dr. Gregory T. Obert. Thank you so much for joining me today. This week's episode is a continuation of my series, the Therapy 101 series. If you are enjoying this series, please do share these episodes where you can. Leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening to this. And once again, these are brought to you by my new private practice, Royal Oasis Psychotherapy Institute. If you are interested in starting therapy that is elite and discreet, go check out my website, which is in the link in the description below, or to the side, or to wherever you're listening to this. Now, I want you to take a minute, and I want you to imagine life as a highway, just like that wonderful song that always gets stuck in our heads. And sometimes you're going to hit smooth highways. Other times you're going to navigate sharp turns, detours, or even complete reroutes. And that's really what life transitions, the topic of today's episode, can really feel like. Sometimes they're exciting, sometimes they're scary, sometimes they're overwhelming. And today we're really going to be looking at how talk therapy can be a helpful GPS in those moments to help us just get back on track. So how am I defining life transitions? I define them as any big change in your life that may be expected or unexpected and is moving you into a new phase of your life, whether you want it to or not. So some examples of what this might look like: think about getting a new job. Think about moving. Maybe a relationship ended for you. Maybe a relationship started for you. All of these particular life transitions could benefit from some sort of talk therapy. Because at the end of the day, it can be a lot to go through a life transition, even if it's an exciting one. Even if we want that transition to occur, there are still going to be emotions that come up, thoughts that come up, and sometimes we need to sort through those with someone who is an expert at doing so. For those that are just joining this podcast, I'm a clinical psychologist who's been practicing in mental health for about 15 years now. And I have helped hundreds of people get through life transitions of their own. And in fact, I know how difficult life transitions can be because behind the doctorate, behind the therapist, I'm still a person. Yes, I have all the expertise, and I am still a person at the end of the day. And you know what? One of the most recent life transitions that I had was becoming a parent. Not once, but twice. The changes in my daily routine, in my life, were joyous and wonderful. I welcomed both of these kids into my world. And there were a lot of things that I wasn't expecting to pop up for me as they showed up into my life. Strain on my marriage for, hey, we got to stay up until really, really late. And we're trying to figure out with our first child, how do we become effective parents? How can we, make sure we're raising a wonderful, incredible child to go out into the world and be the next generation? And all of these things came up with our second child in a different way. Our first kid is a girl, and our second kid's a boy. So now there's a whole different set of expectations because boys and girls need different things in life. So, of course, I have thoughts, I have emotions that are running through my mind about that. And, as I mentioned, how do I navigate my marriage now that there are new people in the family? How can I continue to meet my responsibilities as I go through my daily life? Sometimes it felt overwhelming. Sometimes I felt stuck. And, that's the question that I pose to you. Have you ever felt stuck during a big change? Stick around for this episode, and we'll dive into some things that you might be able to do, and also, if you need some additional help, how therapy can help you. Now, as I alluded to at the beginning, life transitions are not always bad things, nor are they things that we can really avoid, because everyone is going to go through some kind of life transition. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing that these occur, it just is what life is. Life is not always set in stone, and people are people. People aren't computers. And a lot of times things are going to change. As I mentioned, sometimes that's for the better, and we welcome these changes, and sometimes it's not, and we really try to resist or push back against these changes. But it's really in pushing back against these things that we might find ourselves getting stuck, or really just getting upset, feeling depressed, anxious. And through acceptance, which we'll get into in a little bit, we might be able to make these life transitions a bit more tolerable. So once again, what are some of these big life changes that can occur to us on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis? Well, I imagine some of these wouldn't be daily, but you get my point. As an example, I talked about jobs. Jobs are never static. I hear stories from back in the day, the early to mid 20th century, and you would get a job and you would work there for the next 40, 50 years and get your pension, and that was your career. Sounds very stable. Even within that, though, there were going to be changes. Sometimes new opportunities within a company would pop up. Sometimes promotions. Sometimes people would get laid off. And think about the workforce today. In today's day and age, as I record this in the year 2025, jobs can be more volatile than ever, especially considering much of the United States is very services-based these days. Not as much manufacturing, and so a lot of services, digital jobs, and this is fine. I have no problem with people having those types of jobs. It's just that it can be turbulent at times. I often hear about the changes in the tech market as an example, where there'll be a new technology that shows up and a lot of booming and a lot of jobs that flow into that. And then maybe we get bored of it, maybe something better comes along, and all those people then get laid off. A great example of this that has kind of already started happening, as I record this, the rise of AI. So with AI, a lot of jobs that maybe used to have needed a human touch, say things like SEO, people are outsourcing to AI these days. Now, you can make the argument that maybe it's still better to have a person behind the screen helping you with such things, but that's not really what I'm talking about. Really, what I'm talking about is that's just what is happening. And sometimes if we go through a bad economic time, you might get laid off even if you do have a job that most people value. Think back to 2020 when COVID was happening. A lot of people lost their jobs and their livelihoods, even if it was a job that people wanted. Or I should say a job that people valued, society valued. And a career shift like that, of course, I hope it's only a once-in-a-generation sort of thing, and it can happen. It can happen. So, of course, any kind of career shifts, even those positive ones, like I mentioned, a promotion. With promotion comes a lot of new responsibilities. That's a lot more pressure. Yeah, the pay can be nice. It also means a lot more responsibility, typically, and that can weigh on a person. So, shifts in your career are things that can lead to some trouble with life transitions. But what about some other things? We can take a look at personal milestones, marriage. Getting married is a wonderful thing, and I highly encourage everybody, as long as you are being intentional about what you want and who you are with, I highly encourage people to consider marriage. It's not for everyone, but for those who it is for, being intentional, getting married, one of the best things that I ever did. And it can be a joyous thing. It can also be a shift, a big shift. Think about living your life solo and all of the typical things that you would do as a single person. Even if you were dating, you were still single, you were still living your life. Even if you were living with the person you were dating, you had no real responsibility to them. And what I mean by that isn't that you don't have responsibility to someone that you're dating. Really, what I mean by that is you can leave at any time. Now, the same is true for divorce, of course, but it is a bit more difficult to do that versus we're just going to break up and go our separate ways. With a marriage, you're coming together. You're forming a family, a new family. And so this particular relationship, there's joy to it and there can be conflict because coming together under the same roof, learning each other in a different way, saying, wow, I'm giving up being single for the rest of my life. I'm giving up dating for the rest of my life. And I am going to be with this person only. That's a big change. Same is true with divorce. I mean, getting divorced can be devastating for people, especially if you're the one on the receiving end of it. Because, man, maybe you wanted to make the relationship work. Maybe you were willing to put in all that extra effort. And yet the other person just decided, no, they don't want to put that effort into the relationship anymore. It can be absolutely heartbreaking for the person on the receiving end. And sometimes it's heartbreaking for the person on the initiating end. Maybe it's something that they don't want to do. They recognize, wow, this just is not going to work out and it's not going to be I'm not going to live a wonderful life, essentially, if I am with this person who I fell out of love with, who I maybe actively dislike, maybe who I feel unsafe with in some ways. So divorce is, of course, a big, big life transition. I already talked a little bit about becoming a parent. Think about the end of that, being an empty nester as an example. This is something I tend to hear a lot about. In particular, it affects women generally a bit more because now your child is grown. You know, this little creature that you grew inside of you and this tiny little baby that you needed to change its diapers and keep it alive, they are now off into the world, living their lives. And you know what the world's like because you've been in the world for a minute. So not only is there fear and anxiety around that child going off, then it becomes, well, what's my purpose now? Some people, for better or for worse, have defined their lives as the parent. And now that you don't have that child around, it can be devastating. Who am I? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? This type of life transition can be really hard for people to accept and to work through. A few other common ones that tend to show up, think about health or age-related changes. Of course, there can be things like serious illnesses that pop up. One of the most common ones that you're going to hear about that only affects half the population, but think about menopause. That's a big life transition. And similarly for men, think about that classic midlife crisis. You know, you're feeling youthful, you're feeling energetic, you're feeling like you can take on the world and there's still so much for you to do, and then you've hit that halfway point in your life. What have I done with half of my life? Have I accomplished all the things that I want to? Maybe I didn't. Maybe I want to relive some of those youthful fantasies that I had. And, you know, same can be true for women as well. So that change in age can be a big deal. The same is true for something like retirement. Think about people, especially high achievers. This is a big deal. You've worked really hard your whole life, consistently, you've accomplished a lot, and then you hit 65 or 70 or 75, whatever age you decide to retire. And now you don't have to do that thing anymore. Now you find yourself waking up whenever you want to, with no particular tasks to do, And you kind of have to make your life something. You have to fill that time with something. A lot of people can feel useless. A lot of people can feel like they've lost something. It can also lead to other issues. You may or may not remember if you listen to this episode. If you haven't, I highly recommend you go check out the Therapy 101 episode on trauma. When people retired, particularly older veterans, Vietnam veterans, that was a big problem because now they didn't have work, all the trauma came back, right? So that retirement can not just be a life transition that's difficult to deal with, it could also lead to other unexpected changes in one's life. Which leads me to my last point, which is unexpected events.